So Sarge, which missiles do we load? The Frag missiles or the Krak missiles? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel, where we're all about pushing our miniatures to new heights on the tabletop. Now, missile launchers are a very common armament across the armories of the Space Marines and Imperial Guard, and each time you fire you have the option of choosing Frag or Krak. So which one is best to choose, and in which scenario? Now there's a simple answer to this one and a complicated answer. The simple answer is generally to get the best value out of your missile launcher squad, then it's usually going to be Krak. The reason being is the way that points costs are done for guns in 40k, is that you'll be able to get a lot of low strength, low AP firepower for very cheap, where you pay a premium for high strength, high AP firepower that can efficiently threaten tanks, vehicles and hard targets. We can see this in the points cost of the missile launcher when we compare it to the heavy bolter. For a Space Marine Devastator squad, missile launchers will set you back 20 points apiece, where heavy bolters will only cost you 10 points. Now on the anti-infantry firing mode of the missile launcher, the Frag missile, you do have slightly longer range than the heavy bolter, and on average you'll get 3.5 shots, where the heavy bolter only gets 3. But the heavy bolter's shots are resolved at strength 5 AP-1, which is just enormously better than the Frag missile's strength 4 AP nothing. This shows that if you were buying your missile launchers and planning to fire them on Frag mode all game, you pretty much shouldn't have paid the 20 point premium to own the missile launcher and should have just paid 10 points to pick yourself up some cheaper and better heavy bolters. That means to actually get decent value out of your missile launcher Devastator squad, in general you are going to be needing to use the Krak missile mode. Now I know this doesn't apply against literally every army that you might face. Sometimes you might literally just be playing a horde, have no hard targets to shoot at, which means that Frag mode will certainly be helpful. Also, you might have situations in game where your other anti-infantry firepower just hasn't been able to delete a scary enemy infantry threat that's going to be doing you damage next turn, and in that scenario it might well be better to use their admittedly quite inefficient Frag missiles to put the last few wounds on that vital target, rather than using Krak missiles on other heavy hitters that aren't quite as threatening. So for me that's the simple answer. In general you usually want to be firing Krak and just use the Frag missiles in specific scenarios, or if there are literally no hard targets for your Krak missiles to devastate. Now let's move on to the complicated answer, which is actually looking at the numbers behind various targets you might be deciding to shoot your Devastator squad at. In this table we have the amount of expected wounds that you'd get for firing one missile at ballistic skill 3+ against a whole range of different targets. The first two rows show it without any additional AP modifiers, and the bottom two rows show their expected damage output if you're a Space Marine and you're firing in Devastator Doctrine. So the Frag missiles gain AP-1 and the Krak missiles gain AP-3. Obviously the Frag missiles are generally going to be better against infantry and the Krak missiles against hard targets, but it can be interesting to see exactly where the division line lies between these two. First up we have a couple of toughness 3 targets. I did consider putting guardsmen on here as well, but obviously the Frag missile is significantly better. We have the Sisters of Battle, so toughness 3 with a 3-up save. In all scenarios the Frag missile handily outperforms the Krak missile here. That extra AP just not making enough of a difference when the Frag missile has so many more shots and is wounding on 3s. Next we have a Seeker of Slanesh, one of the few models that has toughness 3 and 2 wounds. Despite the multi-damage of the Krak missile launcher, Frag will also win out here, particularly on the Seekers, as the extra AP makes no difference as they're demons with an invul save. If anyone's interested then for like platoon commanders or other toughness 3 multi-wound characters, then the Krak missile does win out, the multi-damage putting it slightly ahead of the Frag missile's extra shots, even at toughness 3. Moving on to toughness 4 targets, the Frag missile is almost double the proficiency of the Krak when firing against Orc boys, which at toughness 4 with a low armor save are one of the perfect targets for the Frag missile. And the Frag missile still comes out ahead on 2 wound toughness 4 targets, where the AP doesn't matter, such as a Fleshhound, who again is safe behind that 5+ invul save that demons have, though it is quite a lot closer on this guy, the Krak missile not being far behind. When we look at the Tactical Marine, presuming he is out of cover, the two weapons are almost exactly the same damage output, with the Frag missile being very marginally ahead when they're not in Devastator Doctrine, but gaining a reasonable lead when they are. This is because the jump between AP0 and AP-1 is a lot bigger than the jump between AP2 and AP-3. Having said that, neither of them are particularly efficient ways of killing tactical marines, being at basically the midpoint between the two missiles means they just aren't really a very good choice for either of them to be shooting at. When we look at the same tactical marine but gaining a cover save, so he's 2-up save unless you have AP, it's a bit more interesting because the Krak missile wins out if there's no Devastator Doctrine, but the Frag missile wins out if they do have the extra pip of -1 AP, though again in that scenario they're almost the exact same damage output. Now if we look at intercessors with a decent save and also 2 wounds, we've really crossed over into Krak missile territory, with the Krak missiles really handily outperforming the Frags in terms of damage dealt. From there on it becomes very simple and basically every single target, with more wounds, higher save, and particularly multi-wound models such as vehicles that we can see here, are just massively more efficient when they're shot by Krak missiles. The Krak missiles get up to some actually decent numbers when they're targeting multi-wound targets such as vehicles, and this really underlines my point about why Krak missiles are the ones that you want to be using when you can. A Krak missile in Devastator Doctrine will do an average of 1.3 wounds to a Space Marine Razorback, for example. Say they were shooting at a Razorback with twin las cannons, which is a fairly common version. If we look at the average amount of enemy points removed from the table per missile, that's basically the highest out of this entire board of options that we could be firing at. We'll be killing about 14 points of enemy by every missile that we shoot at that twin las cannon Razorback, compared if say we're using some Frag missiles to evaporate some Orc boys, where we're killing about 7 points of enemy model per missile fired. So if we were working out some sort of hypothetical points of damage inflicted per missile equation, Krak missiles are basically going to win it. If you're not able to choose your target though, and you absolutely have to shoot one certain unit, then here's my rough rule of thumb. If it's a character or a multi-wound model with 3 or more wounds, always choose the Krak missile. If it's toughness 3 and has 2 wounds or less, always choose the Frag. If it's toughness 4 and has 2 wounds, if it's got an invul or a 6+ save, choose the Frag missile. If it's got a 5+ save or better, then choose the Krak missile. And finally, if anything is toughness 5 or better, then you're also better off using the Krak. In all honesty though, some of the really close calls between these two missiles are going to mean that the actual efficiency that you gain for choosing the right missile isn't going to be the biggest deal in the world, particularly if it's a really close call like tactical marines. But for some targets, the selection of the right missile might not be 100% obvious. It certainly wasn't to me before making this video, so it's been interesting to look into the maths of which ones are better. Thanks very much for listening to another Auspex Tactics video. If you'd like to see other Warhammer 40k tactics content like this every day, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. And if you have been enjoying my videos, feel free to help me out on Patreon, as all of this content does take quite a long time to make. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.